welcome back to our next class in Science for Healthcare Workers. We are finishing our unit over medical terminology. We've already spent 2 weeks looking at part 1 and part 2 of all those Greek and Latin root words that we find in medical terms. Today, we are going to be focusing on all those abbreviations or acronyms. So, first question of the day, what is the difference between an abbreviation and an acronym? Are they the same thing? Are they different? What are they? What do we got? What do you think, ladies?
An abbreviation.
Abbreviation. Yeah, go ahead, Eva.
Do tell.
Okay, there's one I remember is like SOB, shortness of breath, abbreviation, like CNA, certified nurse assistant. Uh, there's C/O, complaint of, like, because I've been working, so we use
Mm-hmm.
these words a lot.
Yep. Yep.
And there's like QID. QID means every or three times a day.
Mm,
QID.
oh, T is 3
Oh yeah.
times a day.
TD. And
Q
then
would
Q
be
is
4 times a
4
day.
times a day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
every hours, which is hours means, yeah, something, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, all of these here that you just came up with, are those abbreviations or acronyms?
I think there are abbreviation, yeah, because there's a meaning after it.
Yep. So they often call these CNA abbreviations, but technically most of these here are acronyms.
Acronyms.
Acronyms is where you take a set of words and you short it where you use the first letter of each word. So for example, CNA. These are 3 separate words: certified nursing assistant, CNA. SOB, shortness of breath. An abbreviation is where we take one word and we make it smaller. For example, doctor, let me go back. Doctor, we abbreviate it as DR. So that would be an abbreviation, but we take a really long word and we make it shorter. And there are some abbreviations where we take a long word and we make it shorter, or we use acronyms where we take the first letter of each word in a long phrase. Does that make sense? Good?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so all of these would be abbreviations. Yeah, because we're taking the first letter of each of the words. Let me delete these here. Now, something fun about abbreviations that I'm going to throw a little extra here. There's actually 2 types of abbreviations. I will give you an example. So both of these represent the first letter of a long phrase, right? We have the Central Intelligence Agency and we have the National what does that NASA stand for? Is it the astronomical? Let me look for it. What does NASA stand for? The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. But these are different types of acronyms. What's different about them?
They are government agencies.
They are. But there's something different. And again, I'm looking at the word level because we're talking about acronyms and they are different types of acronyms. And remember, an acronym is we take the first letter of each word, but there are 2 types of acronyms. And these are examples. CIA is one type, NASA is another type. Any ideas of how these are different? I might give you a few more examples. I have another one here. We have the NFL, which is the National Football League, and we have FIFA, which is soccer. But what does it actually stand for? The International Football Association, but what's the first letter? Federation in it's French. La Fédération Internationale de Football. FIFA. Fédération Internationale de Football Association.
The first one are 3 letters, and the bottom one is 4 letters.
Okay, yeah, there you go. But it's more than that.
Uh-huh.
More than that. Let me see if I can think of another example. We have NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Association, and we have the, let's see if I think of, we have the news channel MSNBC. MSNBC. Do you guys see
So
a pattern?
these are all names of big.
Yep.
Big
All of them
cities.
are. Yep. And we take the first letter of each of their names, but these are making two different groups of acronyms. So here is.
Oh, the bottom one have a lot of vowel. I mean consonant and then vowel.
Oh
I
yes,
don't know.
and that is important. The vowels are important.
Yeah, like in between there's I mean something like that. NASAFIAFA.
All right. Are you ready for the
Yes.
answer?
Yes.
So there are two types of acronyms. One type of acronym, our first category, is we say the individual letters: CIA, NFL, MSNBC. And then we have other acronyms where we read it as if it's one word: NASA, FIFA, NATO. Does that make sense? So like, for
Okay.
example, with NASA, we don't say, oh, I went to go see the NASA. No, it's, oh, I went to go see NASA. But then other acronyms, we actually say the individual letters. And there's no real rule of when we see an acronym, if we say the individual letters or if we read it as a word. The only rule is, I mean, if there's vowels, we tend to more likely say it as if it's a word, because we can say NASA. NFL, we can't say that as a word. What would that be? Right? But those are two types of acronyms. Some of them we say the individual letters, some of them we say as a complete word. Most of the acronyms you will see in the medical world is going to be this category. They often say the 3 words, SOB, right? Because that is then shortness of breath, SOB. But there are these two types of acronyms, and I wanted to point that out to you. And that when you come across one, you kind of just have to ask people how it's pronounced, because there is no solid rule to know, do I say the individual letters or do I read it as if it's a word? Does that make sense? We're good? Are we good?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right, so here is the list of our root words and abbreviations. We're going to review. Let me move this over here. All right. Let me move this a little bit more over. All right, so the beginning are all these root words, these Latin and Greek root words that we were looking at. A few of them are new that we haven't looked at yet today, that we haven't looked at. For example, fats, like lipids are fats. So lip, adip will be fats. The brain, cerebral. What else did we not? The goal, the color blue, skin, hardening, clotting, this one here, sentis. Let's see what else we got. All the way down to here. Here's some other ones. What else haven't we talked about before? Oma, I think, is a new one. So anything that's related to a tumor will have oma. We did talk about phasia, the swallowing. Phasia, speech, paralysis, kind of a little bit. And so this is a list, and I'm going to give it to you as a tool that literally has a solid list of all those different root words that we need to know. And then it moves on to all of our acronyms and abbreviations down here. Here's our acronyms and abbreviations. Here, DOB, date of birth, DNR, do not resuscitate. And there are 127 different abbreviations or acronyms that there is for the CNA program. Here's all of them there. SOB, shortness of breath. You said QID, 4 times a day. Those terms here are actually, so some of the acronyms here on the CNA, when you first look at them, they don't make sense because it's like, how is QID 4 times a day? Any guesses? Why do you guys think that QID stands for 4 times a day?
What's quarter means? Is it 4?
Yes,
Quarter.
quad
Yeah.
is
So
4. And so
quarter.
a lot of these terms are actually acronyms for Latin terms. So
Uh-huh.
they'll actually take the Latin phrase, quad meaning 4. I think it's like intrum dia or diem, which literally means 4 times a day. So that's why we get the QID, because it's an actual Latin phrase. Let me see if I can find the original Latin here. QID in Latin. Quaterndia. That's what I'm seeing here. Quaterndia. So again, they're taking that original Latin phrase and then taking the first letter of each word to make that acronym. So some of these acronyms or abbreviations are Latin terms abbreviated. So you have to kind of make those connections. So we have QID, Q means quarter, quarter is 4. We have TID. What could TID stand for? T would be like trio.
3 times a day?
3 times a day. 2 times a day is twice a day.
It's BID.
It's
BID.
B for it's BID. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Because think about like bi or biannual. So because we're getting that root word of bi meaning 2. So BID would be twice a day. And those often are referring to prescriptions or medication, that they'll say the patient needs to take this medication, QID or BID or TID. And so it lets you know like how often they take that medication.
I'm looking for something on this list.
Yes, what are you looking for?
I saw the other day, before meds. It was really interesting written.
Before medicate or before eating? Was it AC?
Before medication.
Before medication. And it probably started with the letter A.
It was interesting.
It was, okay, let me look it up. Do you remember what it was? AC?
No, it wasn't. It was in cursive. It was 3 or 4 letter
Oh, okay.
abbreviation.
Before medication. So you do it before medication?
Yeah.
QAM?
Where is that?
No, no, QAM is every morning, daily, 4 times a day. Because here's what I'm looking at right here. A list of these, but I'm looking for before medication. I know the one on the CNA list is before eating, before meals.
Maybe there's a symbol or for just before.
Oh, because the A is before. So if
Okay.
you look at like all of these, that means before because it's using the Latin word which is ante, ante, which is means before. So it's always going to be A, and then like for example, before meals is AC because the Latin
Okay.
word for food, like in Spanish, comida starts with the letter C. So it's AC, meaning before the food. So AC is before meals. So and it could actually been maybe like the symbol for medication, like the RX. So like the ARX.
Okay.
Was it
That's
that?
yes.
Was it like A and then like the RX like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, this would have been that symbol for medication, the RX, and then A meaning before. So before you give before you give the medication. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. Absolutely. Great question. So yeah, A meaning before, A meals, AC. And so that's something to keep in mind with a lot of these acronyms is that they may not exactly match the English translation because they're actually abbreviating the Latin term itself. So that's something to keep in mind that we might have to make other connections in our brain to remember that phrase or expression. Like the Q is standing for quad or quarter, which is 4. The B is standing for bi, like bicycle or bifocals, which is meaning 2. So BIT twice a day. QID, QID, D is in DM for day, 4 times a day. All right, so yeah, let's take a closer look. I was trying to see if the medical symbol was here, but I don't see it. I have a video, so going back to our slides, part of our slides is actually a 10-minute long video that covers these 200 different abbreviations that are on this in the CNA course. So here's our video. Let me open it up here and let's look through and chat about these.
@ sign, at, A_, before.
There we go. Pause the video. All right, so this video, the reason why I also connected a video is because you can then actually hear them pronounced. And so you can tell what type of an acronym it is, if they say the individual letter or if they actually read the whole word itself. So let's turn this on here. Make sure our sound is working. All right, so we have the @ symbol.
@ sign, at,
So like you're saying A is before.
A_, before. ABD.
So we have abdomen, the body. This here, is this an acronym or an abbreviation?
Abbreviation.
This is an abbreviation because we're taking that long word abdomen and we're removing all of the vowels and we're just making it shorter. ABD.
Abdomen. AC. Before meals.
So again, this is that Latin term. All right. And I think I have that Latin term here. Antecebum. Antecebum. Before food.
Adlib, as desired.
So as desired.
ADLs, activities of daily living. AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
And so notice this one here is the type 2 of our acronyms, right? Where we don't say the individual letters. It's not AIDS, we say it as a word. AIDS.
AKA, above knee amputation.
Yep, so above the knee.
AM, morning.
Because these two are also Latin terms, like AM and PM. Again, A meaning before, P after, post.
AMB, ambulate, walking. AMT, amount.
Is this an abbreviation or an acronym?
Abbreviation.
Abbreviation.
AX, auxiliary,
Yep.
underarm. B&B, bowel and bladder. BID,
So again, B meaning like bi for bifocals or twice.
twice a day, 2 times a day. BKA, below knee amputation. BM, bowel movement. BP, blood pressure. BR, bed rest. BRP, bathroom privileges. A person is allowed to get out of bed and ambulate to the bathroom on his or her own. C, Celsius, also centigrade. C underscore, with.
And that's like with the C/O. Maurice, what were you saying the C/O standard for? Without their,
It's complained of.
oh, complained of. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Complained of.
CO, complains of. CA, cancer. Cardio, heart. Cath, catheter. CBR, complete bed rest.
All right. So like I said, this is a 10-minute long video. This is a great way to kind of sit down, go through it, and kind of get exposed to a lot of these terms. And then you can also hear how they're pronounced. Since this is a video resource that you have, we're not going to go through the whole 10 minutes. We're actually just going to do an activity and kind of get exposed to some of the newer ones that way. And so let's move on to our matching activity. All right, so we see two colors. We have orange and we have blue. The blue is going to be the term or the root, either the acronym or the abbreviation, and then the orange is going to be the definition. Let's see what we got. Can we make a pair?
Date of birth and DOB.
DOB.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, DOB and date of birth. Got it.
OOB, out of bed.
OOB, they are out of bed. He's running away. Go get him. No, 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 no.
Above the knee amputation and AKA.
Yep, AKA is above the knee.
BP or BP is vital signs. Or blood pressure. Blood pressure.
Blood pressure.
Yeah.
Yep, blood pressure. Oh, say that one more time, Libby. I didn't hear you.
Vital signs and VS.
VS and vital signs. Got it?
Fahrenheit is for F.
Fahrenheit is for F. Talking about Fahrenheit, what is the temperature of the human body? What is the cutoff point for fever?
98.6. I'm gonna guess.
Yep, 98.6, I feel. That's kind of like the cutoff of above that, we're like, ooh, that's a fever. And that is in Fahrenheit. What is that in Celsius?
Oh, it's 37.2.
37.2. Maurice gets the gold star. Good work.
Yeah,
37.2.
I'm getting used to it with Celsius though instead of Fahrenheit.
Yeah, you're more comfortable using Celsius. And so this is something to keep in mind too, is that we do have these two different temperature systems. Fahrenheit is primarily used in the United States. Celsius is used in every single country in the world. Every country in the
Yes.
entire world except the United States.
Except the United States.
Why? I don't know. Don't ask me. I think all right.
Yeah, it was like every time I was here and I'm converting everything, and
Mhm.
plus the pounds except for kilograms. It's like that.
And that's actually going to be one of our next lessons that we get into are actually conversions. How do we convert all of these things? Because as CNAs and nurses, you're doing a lot of converting of different measurements too.
I
Because
should have knew that. I was Canadian. I'm Canadian.
oh yes, yep. Because the Celsius is used in Canada as well too. Absolutely. All right, we got two more. What do we got?
Nerve for neuro.
Nerve is neuro, like neurology, the study
Yeah.
of the neurons. A neurologist is the doctor who works with the brain.
Mm-hmm. And blood vessel is for vascular. Oh.
But is for vascular. Excellent job. All right. I personally think this is a better way to study than to just go through the list in alphabetical order.
Okay. Are we gonna get a copy of this link, right?
Yes, you're going to get a copy of this link. Yep. It's in the slides. So when we go to the slides here, when you get to this page here in the slides, this is page 5. When you get here, this letter is a link that you can click on and then it'll open it up. And so it's in the presentation slides. If you need help finding it, I can let you know. I could also add it into the Google Classroom too as just a link too that you guys can click on. All right, what's next?
Urine and urea.
Yes, urea and urine. Where did you go? Give me some other words using the root word urea. Last week we talked about a whole bunch, how we could add those to a bunch of different things.
There's hematuria.
Yes, hematuria.
Something like that.
Yes, which is blood in the urine. Yep, we can start putting those root words together.
QD for everyday.
Oh, say that one more time, Maurice. We got every day. Can you say it one more time, Maurice? Or did you had to mute? You might have had to mute.
There's ounce and
Sorry, my son and my husband are fighting with Cookie, so I need to mute it.
That's okay, no worries. Go ahead, Libby. You said ounce and
OZ.
And OZ. Very good. And this here, what are we measuring with an ounce? What is an ounce? An OZ. What are
for the liquid? I mean, ounce.
Kind of. So there's two terms, and this is what makes, again, the US system so frustrating. We have ounce, and then we have FLOZ, which is fluid ounce.
Oh, that's water.
Fluid ounces is we're measuring a liquid like water, juice,
okay,
coffee,
juice,
soup. We could say how many fluid ounces is that beverage that they're taking in. This ounce that's just OZ is actually weight. Or how much does something weigh? And it's really, really small. It is smaller than a pound. Do we know how many ounces equals 1 pound?
Unless I ask Google.
I should Google. Does anyone know how many ounces is in 1 pound? Because we weigh things normally in pounds. Like you go to the grocery store and you get 2 pounds of bananas, or you step on the scale and you see how many pounds, and then you've been like in COVID restrictions, and then you look at it and you're like, are you kidding me? I need to start exercising.
16 ounces.
16 ounces. Very good. 16 ounces equals 1 pound. So again, an ounce is pretty small. It's, 16 of them together equals a pound. So we're talking about really small amounts of weight. And so, for example, like a steak, when you order a chunk of steak, it could be an 8-ounce steak or a 10-ounce steak. That means it's less than a pound. Or like a burger. If a patient is getting a burger, it might be a 4-ounce chunk of beef. And when we talk about nutrition, all of the amount of food is weighed in ounces. This many ounces of food. And then liquids are fluid ounces, which are different terms. And that's what's something really confusing is it's the same word, but they're completely different. There is no correlation between ounces as a weight and fluid ounces as volume. Completely different. Very confusing. Same word, different meaning. All right, what else do we got?
Osteo and bone.
Ooh, osteo and bone, very good. Osteo and bone, give me a word with osteo.
Osteoporosis.
Osteoporosis, where the bone starts to kind of deteriorate and break apart. Very common illness with the elderly. All right, what else do we got?
Left or liter for L.
Yes, left or liter for L, so it could be both. And a liter is again another amount of. What are we measuring with liters?
Water, liquids.
Yes, liquids again, so it's volume. Yep, we have like a liter of soda, a liter of soup, things like that. All right.
BP for blood pressure.
BP for blood pressure.
Upper respiratory infection, URI.
Yep, upper respiratory. So again, respiratory is going to be with our lungs, so that infection up here.
Everyday QD.
QD is every day.
And the last one is condition, IA.
Condition is IA. Can we think of any words that end in IA? Meaning condition. Any ideas?
Sorry. IA.
Words ending in IA.
Aphasia.
Yes, aphasia. Very good. Yep. Aphasia was that idea. So aphasia is memory, right? Or no, sorry, speaking. Aphasia is speaking, and it has to do with our brain. A means abnormal or not working. And then the IA is the idea of a condition. So aphasia is the condition that a person cannot speak because they had a TBI, a traumatic brain injury. TBI.
Dementia.
Yeah, dementia is another one. Yeah, a traumatic brain injury can call it. Dementia can also cause it too, where it's kind of like a deterioration of the brain as well. They're more common among TBIs, to be honest. Like speech disorders, someone gets into some type of an accident, it destroys a certain part of their brain, and then we see speech being affected.
Arrhythmia.
Arrhythmia. Okay, yep. That on the condition of the heart having an abnormal rhythm. Yep, an abnormal, and with that heart rate, right? Which could be a future sign of a heart attack, right? That there's something going on with the cardiovascular system. All right, what do we got?
ROM, range of motion.
Yes, ROM, range of motion.
DNR, do not resuscitate.
Range of motion. DNR, do not resuscitate. What does that mean? DNR, do not resuscitate.
Do not do CPR, do not do anything. They just don't want to do anything for them when they like choke or something like that. Do not do anything like.
And why? Why would that be a thing?
I think one of the reason is that is their request.
They don't want to suffer.
Yeah, they don't want to suffer. They don't want to be on,
Drug.
yeah, they don't want to necessarily have machines keeping them alive, because there are certain people, there are certain people that are in comas and have been in comas for years, that machines are technically keeping them alive. Machines are breathing for them. Machines are keeping their heart running. And there's some people that just say, you know what, I don't want to live that way. Don't resuscitate me. That if I have a heart attack, let me die. The medical providers have capabilities of saving someo's life, but they're just saying, no, I don't want to live that way. Do not
Plus,
resuscitate.
it might break their bones.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. There's other things. So that is something that patients can request. I do know that medical providers there are certain rules. There's called the Hippocratic Oath, where medical providers take this oath to say that they will do everything in their ability to save people's lives. And that is often sometimes in conflict with, if someone has a do not resuscitate, that there's certain things hospitals do have to do. I also know that there can be a conflict when a patient says, I have a DNR, I do not resuscitate, but family members disagree. And family members may come in and say, no, you need to save their life. You need to keep them on a respirator. You need to keep them on a ventilator. And the question is, what does the hospital do? And those are questions that I can't quite answer. I know there's actual legal answers to some of those questions. And I feel my gut instinct is telling me, if a family member tells the hospital, resuscitate this person, I think the hospital does have to do something. Um, it depends on the actual how legal the DNR paperwork really was.
Yeah, it's always on paperwork. I
Yep.
watch Grey's Anatomy. It's like some of episode there. Yeah, there's like,
Yep.
do not resuscitate for the patient, but the family still wants it to be resuscitated. So like
Yep.
they're
Mhm.
handing up some paperwork.
Yes, absolutely. And it can be a very sticky situation. As CNAs, you will never have to be making those decisions.
Mhm.
There will be people higher up that get paid a lot more money to make those difficult
Decision.
decisions. Absolutely. But that is something to be aware of, or to inform patients about. A patient may ask you, like, what is this? And you may have to actually teach them and educate them and say, hey, these are your options. These are your rights. As a patient, you have rights. And these are your rights. These are things you can ask for, things you can request, and things the hospital has to give you. hmm And respect. All right. What else do we got?
AM is morning.
Yes, which is easy, right? I mean, we learned that in the second, third grade. AM is morning.
What does AM even stand for? What
Um,
is we're at it?
it is a Latin term. Let me Google it up here. The A, I'm pretty sure, is ante, like before again. But what does AM stand for? I do not speak Latin, ladies.
Mm.
Um, let me see. So I can cheat with Latin because I speak Spanish, and Spanish used to be Latin, and so it's very similar. So yeah. So meridium which would be like noon, midday. So we have meri being mid, diem meaning day, because in Spanish it's mediodía, like the middle of the day, and then ante meaning before. So it's literally before the middle of the day, AM. And then PM would be the opposite, would be post meaning after meridium, the middle of the day. Middle day, cool. How cool is that? We learn something every day. But yeah, I really don't speak Latin. I can look at Latin and kind of break it apart and go, because I have a background in a Latin language, which is Spanish. Because Spanish used to be Latin, but Latin was used to 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 years ago in the Roman Empire. And then they kind of spread themselves out and then broke into all these little city states. And now we have Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, Dalmatian, Romanian, all of these languages that are all different, that all used to be Latin. And the thing is no one really uses Latin nowadays. I mean, the big users of Latin is the Catholic Church and at the Vatican City in Italy and medical providers. So you ladies are keeping Latin alive.
Ha ha ha.
You're keeping Latin alive. All right, what's next?
Nausea and vomiting, N and V.
So nausea and vomiting would be N and V. Nausea and vomiting. Nausea. Can you say that again, Maurice? Nausea.
Nausea.
Nausea, you got it. All right, what else do we got?
Itis, inflammation.
Yep, itis is inflammation. This is a really easy one to use. Give me a few words with our organs that are meaning that inflamed organ. What do we got?
What? Again? Can you repeat that?
Yep, give me some examples of words that end in itis using an organ.
Oh. Appendicitis.
Appendicitis, the inflammation of our appendix. Any others?
Is it epidermatitis? Is one?
Yeah, that would be the inflammation of the skin, because the derma is the skin.
The skin.
Epiderma is one of the layers of the skin, and so epidermatitis would be
It's like inflammation.
Would be the inflammation of the skin itself. Good work. All right, what else do we got? What do we see here? What connections can we make?
Kidney.
Kidney. Yep.
Or nephro.
Yep. And so we have our Latin and our Greek. The REN would be Latin. NEFR would be our Greek root words. We have both of those.
Fascia, swallow or eat.
Yes. And this we see like in the word esophagus, right? The esophagus is that space right before we swallow. We have our mouth and then our esophagus. Phagia. And?
Yeah, that's the last one. Neuro.
Yep. Nerve and neuro. Excellent. All right. Next round.
Oh, I'm enjoying this matching thing.
I know, right? I really feel this is such a better way than to just study a list of words in alphabetical order. And so this is a great tool for you ladies to practice. What do we got?
Okay.
Heart cardio?
Yep. Heart is cardio. Or there was so we had the Latin and the Greek root word there.
And then tachy is rapid or fast.
Yes, tachy is rapid or fast. And we looked at tachycardia. And what's tachycardia?
A fast beat of the heart.
A fast beating of the heart. We got it.
cc, cubic centimeter.
Yes, cubic centimeter. My goodness, what is a cubic centimeter? What does that mean? So first off, let's take a few steps back. What is a centimeter? What is a centimeter? Do we know? How could you describe a centimeter? Do we know what a centimeter is? What do we got, ladies? What is a centimeter?
One-tenth of an inch.
Oh, yep. It's very small. It's, it's a unit of measurement. We're measuring the length of something, and it's pretty small. Like centimeter. That's what we're measuring, is the length of something. And the word itself, centimeter, centa meaning 100, meter is a length of measurement, and a meter is about 3 feet. And so in this if I take a 3 feet chunk and I break those into 100 equal spaces, each of those would be a centimeter. So it's about that small. It's kind of like an inch, right? That's how most countries outside of the United States measure. What we would use inches for, they would use centimeters, because it's about that big. So you have centimeters, but we're talking about cubic centimeters. So we have 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. So it makes like a little cube, which now we're talking about volume, that we can now fill this up with liquid. And again, we're talking about something really small. So what do we use cc's for? When we say, oh, we gave him 0.2 cc's or 3 cc's, 4 cc's.
Is that for it's either the dextrose or anything that comes with the liquid drop something?
Yes, it's often used in medication, and it'll be measuring liquid medication. So it's often shots. So if you look at like a syringe, when they're actually taking like an injection, all of those lines will tell you how many cc's or cubic centimeters there is in one of those syringes. And then also like maybe IV bags might be in cc's, but those are probably just in liters, because there's so much liquid. Cc's, because again, we're talking about something really small, right? 1 by 1 by 1. So it's normally like an injection or a really small amount of liquid. If it was a big amount of liquid, they would just use liters. All right, so that's cc's, and that's how which we measure medication in liquids. All right, what else do we got? We have some repeats.
Auxiliary for AX.
Yep, AX is auxiliary, or what they were talking about like under the arm, auxiliary.
Millimeter is ml.
Yep, ml is milliliter. All right, so we have L as a liter. What is milliliter? What does mil stand for? The C for centa is 100. What does M stand for in mil? Like
Small.
mil. Ooh, it's not small. Good guess though. It's going to be a number, kind of like, so
50?
cent is 100,
50?
like century. Ooh, that's a good guess too. I like looking at the like Roman numerals, but yep, no,
M.
not 50. So C is 100, like centa. Century is 100 years. How long is a millennia?
1,000.
1,000. So mil means 1,000. So how many milliliters is in 1 liter?
1,000.
1,000, exactly. So if we take like a liter of Coke, or if you go and buy like a liter of Coke where it says 1 liter, or like a lot of alcohol sometimes is sold in liters, right? 1 liter. Or if it's a smaller bottle that's less than a liter, it's often 750 milliliters. Like most bottles of alcohol, if you look at them, they say 750 milliliters because 1,000 of them is in 1 liter. Good?
Yes.
That makes sense. So mil,
Yes.
1,000. C, 100, right? Centimeter. Anything with cent is 100. Anything with mil is 1,000. So who has more legs, a centipede or a millipede?
Millipede.
A millipede has more legs than a centipede. All right, what else do we got?
A millipede.
Range of motion. ROM.
Yep. ROM, range of motion.
Nausea and vomiting. NNV.
NNV, nausea and vomiting, and stat, meaning right now, ASAP. Stat. All right, we have time for one more, and then we're moving on. Here's some new ones.
complaints of a C/O.
C/O is complains of.
Oxygen, O2.
O2 is our oxygen.
BM for bowel movement.
BM for bowel movement. What is a bowel movement?
That's the poop.
Yep, any type of a poop. And I think there's like 7 classifications of poop. It's actually you can really study this as a gastrologist, right? That the gastrologists they classify different types of poop, and that might actually be one of your jobs as a CNA is to actually monitor the bathroom usage of your patients and even monitor what type of poop they have. There's different classifications depending on how hard it is, how constipated they are, how runny it is, if it's like diarrhea. And that is something that there is a chart of these different types of bowel movements, and you can mark them off on saying, oh, they had this type of a bowel movement or this type of a bowel movement. Such a lovely job, isn't it? All right, what else do we got?
Process of recording, graphy.
Yep, process of recording, graphy, like our trying to think of any of our, I don't think we actually talked about any words. All the words that come to my mind are gram, not graphy, like electrocardiogram, like the idea of recording. But graph, I mean like photograph that you're taking and putting it on paper. All right, what else do we got? 4 more.
Date of birth and
Yep.
DOB.
DOB, date of birth.
I think the fat and the lip.
Yes, like lipo for lipids. So lipids are fats. It's a scientific word for fats. ADIP is then the Greek root, I feel for it.
TX treatment.
TX treatment. And then hardening, if something gets hardened. Excellent, very good. So like I said, this is one of our links that we can go to here for a way to study. I personally think this is the best way to study. I think it's fun and enjoyable, and it kind of like process of elimination that they give us some, and then if we don't necessarily know it, we can kind of skip it. The last thing that I have for you is a website where I've given you flashcards of all of these terms and abbreviations. That one is actually in our Google Classroom. So if you go to Google Classrooms, I have our presentation slides here. The presentations have the links to the ones that we just did. If you go up here to CNA abbreviation flashcards and click here, it'll actually take us to Quizlet. And Quizlet here, I have all these digital flashcards for you of all 127 of them. So you see the word, this is an abbreviation, not an acronym, ABD. And what does that stand for? ABD. It's a part of the body.
Abdomen, is it abdomen?
It is abdomen. So then you click it, and after clicking it, it flips it over for you. So it shows it to you. AC, it's a Latin term. 2 words.
Before meal?
Before meals, or antecudium, I think, for food. Yep, before meals. ADL.
Adult daily living?
Yes, the activities of daily living. So this is all 107 of them too. So that's another resource that you ladies have. So I've given you 3 different ways to study. We have a video where you can hear them. We have a matching activity that you can actually do with tactile, or you can go to all those digital flashcards and get a whole list of them in alphabetical order. All right, now with the little bit of class that we have left, I wanted to talk to you about tips of how to learn vocabulary. So my first question for you ladies, how do we learn vocabulary? What's the best way to study vocabulary words like all these acronyms, abbreviations, medical terminology? How do we learn vocabulary? What's the best way for us to learn?
Give a short period of time reading it, and
Mhm,
but do it like more often, but like
mhm.
short period of time.
Yes, there's a lot of research going on in neuroscience right now, specifically with adult brains, saying adult brains do so much better with short amount of time, more often. And that's really kind of affecting how teachers teach. Because, like, for example, with our class too, we have this huge hour and a half long class only once a week. It would be more beneficial for us to meet for 20, 30 minutes 3 times a week than to meet once for a larger chunk of time. That it just is better for your brain to do small chunks of time more often. So when you're studying independently throughout the week, really think about that. Do these small chunks of time more often. What else can we do to help learn vocabulary?
Write it.
Writing, absolutely. It's a great, helps lots of people, especially if you need to know how to spell and write the term. hmm What else can we do? I have, go ahead.
Go for like what you're doing, like prefixes, suffixes, root word.
hmm Yeah, I call that making connections, right? That if we take it and the more we can think about the word and connect it to things we already know, like, oh, I do know this part of the word, or I know the word bicycle and bifocals, and bi meaning two. So if I see BID, I know that means twice a day, and all of these IEDs have to do with how often we do something. And if it's QID, I know that's 4 times a day. If it is TID, it is 3 times a day. Making those connections. So I have 6 tips, ladies. Here are Sean's 6 tips for being a better student of vocabulary and learning language. Tip number 1, practice, 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 practice. That's like how we learn vocabulary. No one hears a word one time, walks away from it and says, oh yeah, I know this word and I have it memorized. I know how to spell it. I know how to write it. I'm perfect at it and I'm going to use it in all my vocabulary because I heard it one time. It doesn't work that way. Language takes so much time to develop. Think about children, right? And children and how perfect their brains are for learning language. How long does it take a child to start producing its first words?
Mm, like a year or so.
Yeah, that they're a year in this state where they're completely surrounded in language, right? They're hearing all these words and they're constructing meaning. They're figuring out all these clues and all these things. And it takes them a year of all that exposure to start communicating with words. Maybe they've already been communicating non-verbally, right? They understand this idea of exchange that I can tell you what I want. And if I tell you correctly, you give me exactly what I want. And it takes a year for them to start developing those words. And even then, they're not necessarily understandable or concrete. They might be part of the word or like the first sound of the word. And then it takes up to like 5 years until we get that really kind of concrete vocabulary. And it takes just trial and error and practice using words, using them incorrectly. And we go through this language learning process. It takes 7 years for that child from birth to 7 to kind of have a working vocabulary of 50,000 words. 7 years. That's a lot of practice. And their brain is in like the best primal condition for language learning. You are all adults that have gone through puberty. Your brains have made changes. Your brains have solidified to a certain point. It's still very elastic, right? We have neuroplasticity where your brains can grow and you can learn new things. It's just a little bit more challenging. So as adults, my best advice for you is just keep practicing, right? The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And my metaphor is like a path, right? That if you walk through a field of grass, are you going to see a path? Not really. How do you create a path like this in a field of grass?
Keep walking
Repetition.
and die on
You
that
do it.
spot at the
Yep.
same time.
You do it again and
More
again
often.
and again, and you walk it. And the more you walk it, the more defined it gets, the more concrete it gets. Your brain does the same thing. Every time you do something, you make what's called a neural pathway. Your neurons go and it creates a path in your brain every time you do a new skill. And every time you do something new for the first time, you're creating this new bridge. And the more you do it, that bridge connects again and it connects and it connects. And every time you connect that neural pathway, you're making a stronger, defined path. And it makes it quicker and easier, and it's there in your long-term memory. You can access it faster and you know that information. If you just do it once, it's like walking across a field once. And then you turn around and you say, oh, let me walk it again. Well, I have no idea where I've been because I don't even see it anymore. It takes that repetition and practice. So the more you can do it. Tip number 2, really think about the complexity of words. Words are these, there's kind of 3 aspects to every word, right? We have the sound. How do we say the word? What is the sound of the spoken word? We have the spelling of the word. How do we write the word? And then we actually have the actual meaning. What image comes to our mind? What is the actual object that these sounds and these little squiggles on paper actually represent? And making sure that we're capturing all 3 of those. We need to know how to say the word. We need to know how to write the word with our spelling, and we need to know what the word means, but that can also be very complex. We have to think about spelling, all the different meanings of the words, because words don't just mean one thing. They can mean many different things. For example, look at these pictures. All of these pictures represent one word. What is that word?
Scale.
Scale. Scale. 4 letters. Wait, SCAL. 5 letters. I can't count today. I'm not a math teacher. What are those 5 letters?
SCALE.
Yep, scale. But yet, think about how complex all these different meanings are. What is this scale?
Weight scale.
Yeah, that we measure things with, right? We can put it on and see how many ounces something is, how many pounds are. What is this scale?
How strong you are?
Mm-mm.
I don't know. What's this one?
Scale is another word for climb. You can scale a mountain. You can scale a wall. He scaled up the side of the building. To scale means to climb, right? It's
I did not know that.
yeah, you can
Yeah, me
scale
too.
up something. Yep. And that is a word. It's often used more with animals. So like lizards and geckos, we can be like, oh, he scaled up the wall. Or the cat scaled up the curtains. To scale, meaning to climb, right? We use this word so many different ways. What about fish? What does it mean by when we say the scales of a fish?
It's their skin.
Yep. What about in drawing or in architecture? We say, oh, this drawing is to scale. This is a blueprint of your house and it's to scale. What does that mean?
Measure.
Yes, it's more than just measure, right? It's measuring it exactly, right? That if it's this big on the drawing, it might be 2 feet in real life. And so then this big would be 8 feet, and then this big would be 10 feet. That there is this idea of a ratio, that it's equal and balanced. What about art class? We talk about the color scale. What does that mean?
Comparing colors.
Kind of. For example, we can have the blue scale. So this is blue. What do we see These are all
Shade.
blue. They're all exactly shade. So when we talk about the color scale, right, the scale, it's all these different shades. Some are lighter, some are darker, and they talk about the scale of color. But in music class, does anyone play any musical instruments? We talk about scales, right? Like, oh, this is in the scale of C, or this is in the scale of G. What does that mean?
Of notes.
To measure the notes, yeah.
It's like a segment of notes that go in a certain order, and that's the scale. And they have an order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Scale. And so all of these are the same word. And so there's all these different various meanings, but then that also means there's just as many different uses, right? Sometimes we use it as an object, as a noun. Sometimes it's an action, like to scale up the wall, right? Sometimes it's a description. And all of these create all these various different images and pictures. And so that is something to think about when you're learning vocabulary, is also the depth of the vocabulary. What are these various meanings that I can connect to? Because again, that's really making your brain think. And the more your brain thinks and the more connections you make, the deeper your vocabulary is going to be. That if we say AC, you could just memorize and say, oh, AC means before food. But now that you realize that it's actually Latin and that the A always means before, when I see it in other words, I know it's always going to mean before. AM, before the middle of the day, right? That we know A always means before. And we've made those connections by diving deeper into the complexity of the vocabulary. That is a great skill to have when you're in the CNA and nursing program, to help you learn this large amount of vocabulary so quickly. Because you see it in those textbooks, right? I gave you the copy of that first page of each textbook. How many vocabulary words were there in that textbook? I mean, huge, right? So many. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, use the words frequently. Use them as often as you can. Language is an active sport, right? Think about babies, right? Babies don't just soak in the language. That's kind of step number 1. But what do babies do after they've soaked in all of that knowledge? What do?
They say it.
Yes, they play around with it, right? They're like, is this the right word? Especially little kids, right? Have you ever had little kids where they're like, you can tell they're trying to see how they use certain words, especially bad words, right? They know that they, they know that there's these words that adults use, and they're just like, can I use it? When can I use it? And they kind of play around with it. That's part of language learning too, is this idea of using the words. You may use it incorrectly, and that's fine. But that's because that's part of the learning process. But it's not just saying the words. It's also writing the words, hearing the words, reading the words. We need to be accessing these 4 different modalities. And research suggests that you need to do that 7 times to transfer it into your long-term memory. You need to read a word 7 times. You need to say it 7 times. You need to hear it 7 times. You need to write it 7 times to really transfer it into your active vocabulary so you can use it in a day-to-day life. And that takes time. So that's my suggestion for you. Use these as much as you can. My next one, frequency. And this is what Maurice was saying too. A lot of research is saying shorter amount of time for a higher frequency, right? You could sit down for an hour and study all these words for an entire hour once a week, but you're going to forget so many of them when you get back to it the following week. It is so much more beneficial to do 5 minutes 6 times a week. So pretty much every single day you're spending just a small amount of time. But what's interesting about this is you're actually saving time. How much time is 5 minutes 6 days a week?
30.
30 minutes. You're technically spending half the amount of time, which is crazy. And it's actually more beneficial. And that's what research suggests. For 1 hour of independent study once a week, you learn more spending half that amount of time if you would break it out every single day. Interesting. It's technically, it saves you more time. It seems like, it's hard work because I have to do it every bit of day, but how much is 5 minutes, right? I mean, you can do that with your morning coffee or your morning tea. You sit down, you have breakfast, it's you time, you're alone, you pull open your little notebook that you have, and you just kind of review some of the words. Like, oh yeah, that's right, I heard this last week, and I heard this, and that's right, this person said this, and I'm learning those new vocabulary words. And it takes that repetition and practice, just a little bit of time every single day, and your vocabulary will explode. And tip number 5, make as many connections as possible. That's how your brain works. Your brain is literally what's called a neural network. It is just connections, right? It's these cells, these neurons connected to each other. And every time you learn something, you're just making these connections back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? And the more connections you can make, the more you can relate it to other things you know, the more you'll learn it. So asking these questions, how does this relate to what I already know? Do I already know something about this? Like, I know the word AM, and AM is morning, meaning before. And so A is before, and I see it like AC, meaning before I eat. C is food. I know the Spanish word for food is comida. So C is food in Latin. So AC, before you eat. That's how my brain is working. And now it's in there in that long-term memory because I literally made all those connections. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the more connections you can make, the stronger your vocabulary will build. Can I identify any root words? Are there any parts of it that I already know? What does it look like? AC kind of looks like AM, so A meaning before. What does it remind me of? Any of those connections. And the fun one about reminding is it may not even be anything related to the meaning of the word, but if it just reminds you of something else, that is just enough of a trigger to help you remember it and put it in your long-term memory. Because let's take a test. I showed you something about a month ago. We haven't talked about it since. I doubt you've used it since. What do you remember?
Oh, this is yeah.
Tell me what you remember.
This is kind of pattern.
There's a pattern.
Yeah.
Do we remember the pattern?
Kind of like X's and O's, that little
Yes, yes, right? Called the hashtag or the X's and O's. So again,
Yes.
see what your brain did? Your brain made that connection to prior knowledge. I've played tic-tac-toe, the X's and
Mm-hmm.
O's. I know the hashtag symbol, and that's in your memory. So you attached it to that long-term memory. Boom. It's like this symbol. And then what else? What else is the pattern?
Yeah, you did like separate them, like separate the
Mm-hmm.
other side, and then
Yep.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
separate.
So what would this be? What letter is that?
Hold on. We need cheating.
What do we know? What letter is that? Do you remember the pattern? So we had the tic-tac-toe thing, and then what were the letters?
Is this letter like A B C D? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Because
A B C
we used the
D.
alphabet, right?
Yes.
E.
E F G. Yep. H I. Yeah.
So what is this first letter here?
So that is letter C.
Nope.
Is it C? Ah,
F.
F. Okay. Oh, F.
Next
Okay.
one.
And A for that one.
Mm-hmm.
G.
And
Yep, exactly.
yeah,
See, you
G.
got it. And so, but do you see how I literally showed this to you a month ago?
Mm-hmm.
A month ago, and you remembered it. Why did you remember it?
Because we read it, we get back to it.
Because we made these connections, right? That we really connected these things to your brain. Because this is how the brain works. And so tip number 6, my last tip is kind of like taking notes, is to keep a logbook of all your new words. especially when you are starting off a new job. Like if you start off as a CNA or a nurse, there's going to be terms and words and expressions and things that you've never heard before. Keep a little book in your purse, in your bag, in your pocket. And when you come across something, you write it down immediately. Because here's how our brain works. We need to make those connections. We are only aware of about 5% of the stimulus that's going on around us. 5%. Out of all of the things happening around us, sounds, lights, textures, temperatures, all the things going on in our body, all those things that are happening subconsciously, our brain, our consciousness is only aware of about 5%. Do you remember when we watched that video where there was the bear that was moonwalking among all those basketball players? And I asked you to count how often they threw the ball, and you completely missed the moonwalking bear?
Yes.
Because you were paying attention, you were focused, because our brain can only focus on so many things at once. It can really only focus on one thing at once, and that's 5% of all of the stimulus that we're bringing in. Now, out of that 5% that you actually are aware of, that you're paying attention, you have 5 seconds to respond. And when I say respond is basically your brain, you have 5 seconds for your brain to go, oh, that's like this, that's like this, that's like, and to make those connections for you to remember something. And that's just your short-term memory. Then you have less than 2 minutes to actually use it and make more connections to put it in your long-term memory. I made those connections for you. I talked to you about the hashtag symbol, right? That I created this environment where you were exposed to something new. We made all of those connections and we stored it into the back of your brain. So a month later, I could show you and your brain went, I remember this. I made all of those connections that were in there. And we did it in less than 2 minutes, because that's what your brain needs to do. So when you are exposed to a new word at work, you literally have less than 2 minutes to do something about it. If you don't interact with that word, if you don't use that word, if you don't apply that word or make any connections within 2 minutes, it's gone. Say adios. Bye-bye. You have 2 minutes. That's it. That's why I really suggest carrying a notebook, because you need to do it immediately. You come across that new word, you are exposed to a new term that you've never heard before. Ask that question. Oh, how do you spell that? Oh, that's interesting. Are there any root words that I know? Let me write that down and put it in your notebook and save it for your morning coffee, where you do your 5 minutes of review every day. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that is a great habit to get into, to learn new vocabulary words. Because if you wait, if you say, oh, that was an interesting word, let me write it down this afternoon at lunch. Nope, it's gone. You lost it. You have to do it within 2 minutes. And writing it down is making connections, but it also saves it that you can now go back to tomorrow and sit down with coffee. And that really starts this idea of applying and using it, that you're allowing yourself, you're allowing your brain to get exposed to it more often. So those are my 6 tips for learning vocabulary. Practice, practice, practice. Make all of those connections and depth of how complex the vocabulary is. Use it 7 times. Make those connections for a short amount of time every single day, and act on it immediately. The moment you're exposed to the word, write it down. Otherwise, you will lose it. And that's learning medical terminology. Any questions for me, ladies?
Nothing from me.
All right, so looking at the Google Classroom, let me pose over here. Here's the activities for today. So activity number 1 is the video. I gave you a link for that whole 10-minute video. And the question is, what are 3 words you didn't remember? So we covered a lot of them. I don't actually think we hit all 127 of those acronyms and abbreviations. So find 3 of them that you didn't know, or we didn't talk about, or you didn't remember, and write those down from the video. Number 2, there is a matching quiz. There are 19 of them. There's 19 of the acronyms and 19 of them that you have to match. And you can just type your answers, or you can physically draw on the PDF and submit it that way if you want. You can turn it in however you want, but you have to match those. And then those are the only two activities, because this one is going to take you a little while since there are 19 of them. And some of them you might actually have to go and look up. You'll have to look through the list, look through the activities, look through the flashcards, and find what that abbreviation acronym is. And then I gave you some other resources. Here's the link to the flashcards. And then here are my presentations that have all of those other links to those game matching activities with the flipping cards that we did. All right, any questions?